Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the FST5 webinar series. This is actually our first webinar of 2025. So thank you all for coming in and joining us. And we are super excited about our guests today. I'm so excited to hear Lynnette's story and for her to share that with you guys, and to hear about this exciting new book she just wrote. So before we jump in, as always, I am Manisha Leary, the program manager for FST5, and I am with my co-host Kobe Taylor, who's an FST5 peer. And we are Frontline Strong is all things first responder, mental health, and behavioral health. So throughout the state of Michigan, this is going to be your one direct access to any type of resources for first responders and their families. You can find out more information at www.fst5.org, or you can call our crisis and resource line, which is 24/7, 365 at 833-34-STRONG. That is 833-347-8766. I hope you guys get a chance to either call the number, check out the website, and if you have your phones with you, you can go ahead and scan the QR code and it will take you right to all of our social medias and our websites. So, Kobe, how are you?
I am doing great. It's good to be back. Our first
Yeah,
one.
yeah, and we're gonna keep it going consistent this year. I know we've had some months off, but this year we're gonna definitely keep it going consistently. So why don't you introduce our guests and then we can get started because I'm super excited to get into
Yeah,
Lynnette's story.
I'm excited to introduce Lynette. Lynette's helped us out tremendously. She's a CISM instructor as well and has helped one of our peers get certified. So I'm excited to have her on here. I'll let her kind of introduce herself, her background, and what she's doing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. Good to see you again. Always a pleasure. We've known each other for 4 years now, I think.
Yeah, since the first one.
Yeah, yeah. So this is exciting. It is an honor to be here and have the opportunity to share my story. We're talking a little bit at the beginning. I'm basically just going to kind of share my story to start with, and then at the end, I would love to have some engagement, some questions, some conversation. If there's something in the middle that is pressing and somebody wants an answer, I will definitely answer it. So throw the questions at me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lynnette Fritshaw. I live in Alberta, Canada. Apparently it's very obvious I'm Canadian. I am a mom to a 12-year-old boy. I have been married 13 years to my husband, Wade. I am a retired career firefighter. I am a published author. And I run a business called Fire Within Crisis Services Incorporated, and it is something I am extremely passionate about. So I dedicated 18 years of my life to the fire service. I was an auxiliary paid on call for 4 years, and then a full-time career member for 14 years. I was the very first and only female firefighter in my department. And breaking into that culture was no easy task. The old boys club made it extremely difficult for me to break into. I just didn't know how difficult it was actually going to be. As you know, first responders means we attend some extremely horrific scenes, some highly stressful calls with the high potential of trauma resulting in psychological injuries. But surprisingly, my trauma didn't stem from those yet. I say that yet because trauma has a way of sneaking up later on and can surface at any time. My psychological injuries stemmed from a source that is very rarely spoken about. Mine were a result of enduring years of discrimination, bullying, harassment, and misogyny from men in authority positions in my career. Right from the moment that I stepped foot in the fire hall to inquire about becoming a firefighter to the time that I chose to take an early retirement, the nonsense was there from beginning to end. When I first started, there was captains that would take me aside and aggressively tell me that I was only allowed to watch. I was not allowed to participate in anything. I could stand off to the side and be seen and not heard, and I was only allowed to watch. So that is what I did. I stood off to the side with my hands behind my back like a good little girl, and I just watched and learned. I went through multiple hiring processes, and I was given the lamest excuses as to why I couldn't get the job or why I wasn't the successful candidate. But when the excuses ran out, they informed me that a new physical test was going to be implemented. And it was a test that 97% of females don't pass on their first 2 tries. They were hoping that that would be the loophole that they could use to not allow me to get hired. And this was coming from management, I need to add. This was, or not coming from management, I'm sorry. This was coming from the union. This was the brotherhood that I was trying to become part of. But much to their dismay, I went and I did the physical test at my own expense, and I passed on my first try. So the next posting, I got hired for the full-time position, but not without conditions. They had decided that my physical certificate had expired, and they wanted me to have to do it again within my 6-month probationary period. So not only was I the first one that ever had to do the physical test, I actually had to do it twice. So I did before my 6-month probationary period was up, and the disappointment on their faces when I presented them with the certificate again was well worth it. So November 9th, 2009, I put on my crisp uniform for my very first shift as a career firefighter. And I arrived at the fire hall, and I walked into the most uncomfortable space that I had ever been in my entire life. Even though I had been there every Tuesday night for practice for 4 years, it was completely different. And I knew I wasn't welcome by a certain few. They made that very clear. And it ate them alive that I was there. And so that day, my senior captain took me aside to have a chat in the dispatch room, and he closed the window and he closed the door and he pointed towards the chair for me to have a seat. And he said, "You must be so excited. You did it. This is the best day of your life, but there's something you need to know. We've all been in conversation, and we're all in agreement that if you get yourself into any kind of trouble, we're not coming to save you. You're on your own." And I literally think my soul left my body in that moment. I sat there and I watched his lips continue to move, but I have no idea what he said. I went into complete freeze mode. And I just remember being completely consumed with fear and confusion at the same time, because I know the fire service is, you know, everybody, you do everything in partners, and we're all looking out for each other, and we're there to save the community, and the brotherhood is really strong. All of these things were racing through my mind, but I also knew that I was an outsider. And I hoped that I had some friends in there that I had made in the 4 years that I'd been there, but I honestly didn't know. And I also knew that there had been backroom meetings going on between the members trying to find ways to not allow me to get hired. So I actually didn't know the scope of what or who I was truly dealing with, and I was terrified. I mean, how do you thrive in a job with that in the back of your mind? A job that involves life and death, no less. I mean, how do you challenge yourself and push your limits to reach your full potential when you're afraid all the time? Every call that I went to, that was always in the back of my mind. And I would say to myself, don't get yourself into any kind of trouble. Don't mess things up. Don't get lost. Like, I always had this dialogue playing and these pep talks going through my mind at every single call, praying with everything that I had that I would not get myself into any kind of situation, because I did not want to find out if what he actually said was true or not. I was approached by the media multiple times in the very beginning of my career because it was huge news. I was the first and only female that the department had, and they wanted to run stories, and they absolutely forbid me to speak to any media. They didn't want anybody to know that I was there. It wasn't advertised. It wasn't acknowledged in any way, shape, or form. They could not get past their egos to realize how good it would have actually made the department look and how it would have boosted our community image, like everything. But I guess I think differently than they do. But they couldn't bring themselves to give me any kind of acknowledgement whatsoever. And so I spent over a decade trying to prove myself. There was always those eyes on me. They were waiting, wishing, hoping that I would mess up so that they could use it against me. Every little move I made, they were watching me like a hawk. And it was absolutely exhausting. It was an endless task that I couldn't win. And it didn't matter what I did. It was not good enough. Nothing was ever good enough. And it created so much self-doubt within me. It broke my confidence. I knew with every part of my being and in my soul that I could do the job and I could do it really, really well. And I did have moments where I was able to shine, but definitely not to the degree that I should have been able to throughout my career. And the hardest part for me to comprehend was how personal everything was. All I ever wanted was to learn from these men. I wasn't there to take their job. I wasn't there to make them look weak because, you know, if a girl could do it, maybe it made them look bad. It took away their tough guy image. Like, I don't know their thought process. It has never made sense to me. But I truly just wanted to learn from them. But these men were threatened by my presence, and they turned it all personal. They went to great lengths sometimes to ensure that I didn't get things or I had to do things extra. And they were so worried that I would get special treatment. But I got a lot of special treatment, but it just was by no means ever in my favor. So don't get me wrong, I did have the opportunity to work with some incredible men. I have truly had the honor of working beside some of the most incredible firefighters with integrity and honor, and I am proud to call them my brothers. I also was hired by a man who believed in me, and he went against all the odds with everybody fighting against him, and he gave me a chance and he hired me anyways. And they were mad. And they went to great lengths to make his life hell as well. So I remember in the beginning of my career being asked, what are you going to do when you see a dead body? And I jokingly said, I don't know, because I've never seen one. And the captain turned very serious and he said to me, well, I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to cry. And so I didn't. For well over a decade, I didn't cry. I punched holes in walls instead. I used anger because it was socially and culturally acceptable. I punched holes in the walls at home. I took my anger out in throwing my child's bike across the yard, throwing fits, but I wouldn't cry. And I don't know if anybody here has ever heard the saying, your body keeps the score. What you don't express, your body will suppress. That was me. Emotions are meant to be expressed, and that's what they're designed to do. So the right emotion in the right moment, and when you suppress it, it attaches itself to your tissues and your organs, and it will cause you dis-ease at some point in your life. That was me. I had so much body pain. I was in peak physical condition, always, and I was in so much pain. I had unexplained back pain, tension headaches. I had an eye twitch that wouldn't go away for months at a time. I had healthy coping mechanisms in place. I had all of the resources for massage and acupuncture and chiropractor and all of the things, and nothing was working. I had them in place from day one because I knew that the possibility of the job causing me psychological injury was very real, and I wanted to make sure that nothing could destroy me mentally with the job. And I was so focused on the job and had coping mechanisms in place for that, but I didn't even for 1 second think that I was experiencing trauma from the mental and emotional abuse and manipulation that I was going through from my bosses and my coworkers and the people that were my brothers. It had gone on for so long that I just deemed it as normal. And they had gotten away with it for so long that that just became the normal way that they treated me. And so eventually I had an awakening and I started embarking on a healing journey. And imagine my surprise when I started unpacking and processing these things that had actually been going on and the emotions that I allowed to come out. I actually cried, ugly cried, until I couldn't stop crying. Once it started flowing, it didn't stop. But my body ailments went away. I had no more pain in my back. I had no more eye twitch. My muscles weren't super tense up in my neck, causing me tension headaches anymore. And it was like a massive realization. Even my doctors were like, what is going on with you? Like, you've been coming to the chiropractor office 3 times a week for 10 years. And now all of a sudden, the places that we adjust you don't need it anymore. And I was like, I unpacked some trauma. And this is what happened. My body was like, we are finally free. It was hard, extremely hard, to realize that I was injured. I was extremely injured, psychologically injured, and I didn't even know it. I was functioning in a trauma response on a daily basis, and I had no idea. I was highly functioning, full out CPTSD, high functioning, burnout happening, but I am a very stubborn person and I will push through and push through. And I didn't even know that that's what was happening. My career had become my identity, and I thought, this is just who I am now. I'm absolutely fucking miserable, and this is just who I am. And that wasn't the case. My experiences didn't harden me like I had let myself believe. Once I realized that my experiences were supposed to be a place of reference and not a place of residence, that was a massive awakening for me. But I had to get really, really fucking honest with myself, like really honest. And I had to acknowledge what role I was playing in my own suffering, because I had allowed it. I had stayed silent and kept secrets to keep others comfortable for well over a decade. Most of my life, in fact, started from childhood, as most trauma does. And then it just expanded from there. And so also in the process of trying to ease the pain of what I had endured, I downplayed my accomplishments. And I was on a solo road trip and I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about how when you're the first at something, that makes you a legend. And I was like, whoa, I'm a legend. That was like this massive slap across the face. And I was like, I'm the first ever female. I am a legend. And that was something that I had never, ever allowed myself to process. The magnitude of that accomplishment alone, that had been hidden and stuffed away for well over a decade, was incredible. And just allowing myself to process it and absorb it, receive it, was such an incredible gift. And I realized in that moment that that was something that they could never take away from me. I had allowed them to take so much other stuff away, and I had given my power away, but that was something that they could never take away from me. And so in the fall of 2022, I was passed over for a promotional position that I deserved and everybody knew that I wanted. Like every department, we had made 5-year, 10-year plans. So it was common knowledge that that was the direction that I wanted to take my career. But the chief had other plans. This was a new chief, by the way, not the one that had hired me. And again, it was personal. And so I was passed over with the lamest excuses as to why I didn't get the position. And the union couldn't do anything. All that was said was, management has a right to manage. And it was left at that. And so they hired an external candidate without full qualifications over an internal candidate who had dedicated 13 years of her life to the department. And that was actually the turning point for me. I had finally reached my limit. Things weren't going to change. And with all the work that I had been doing on myself, I knew that I couldn't heal in the place that broke me. And I also couldn't fully heal without being able to share my story. And I couldn't share my story if I was still employed. So I made the very difficult decision to take an early retirement, and I stepped away from a career that I absolutely loved in the summer of 2023. And I had been working on my business in the shadows for a few years at that point, getting certifications. I was already working with clients one-on-one, doing trauma coaching. I was hosting workshops. And I seen a space where people lose their identity to their experiences and they give their power away somewhere along the way. It was actually a very common theme. And I had done it myself. And keeping secrets to keep others comfortable is a very common theme. And having no boundaries is also an extremely common theme. And we lose our well-being in the process. We give it up. And I discovered a quote that I now live by. And it's, you don't have a secret, you have a story. And I decided that I needed to tell my story, the whole story. And through it all, I could have allowed what happened to destroy me. And I had many people say, well, if it was that bad, why did you stay for that long? And in all honesty, I stayed because I deserved to be there. I earned my spot, and I deserved to serve and protect my community, my friends, my family, and I loved my career. I loved being able to do that and give back to my community. But the realization of it knocked me down for a little while. But through it all, I ultimately made the decision to heal. And finding my voice and telling my story has fulfilled a purpose and a passion in me that I didn't even know existed. And there's another saying that I am uniquely qualified to help the person that I used to be. And that really registered with me as well, because personal experience, I believe, goes a really, really long way in helping people when you can relate to what it is that they're going through. Not just textbook and certification, but actual experience. And so I am proud to say that I suffered psychological injuries for many years, but I am one of the 10% that has post-traumatic growth. I've come out the other side, stronger, better, faster, wiser, all of the things. And I have the personal experience to share with others and impact others and support them and guide them through to show them that it can be done. I was given that mountain to show others that it can be moved, without a doubt. And my story is huge. I only share bits and pieces. Like we talked about, I wrote a book because there's so much. And I actually realized throughout the process of writing my book that I should have done it in a series because there was so much. Without even knowing, throughout the entire career, I took notes and did journal writing on everything. I have thousands and thousands of pages of the experiences and how they impacted me. And it all came down to, it wasn't about who. Everybody wanted to know if the book shared names. Some were very worried there was names in the book, but it was never about who. It was about what was done and what was said and how it impacted me in my life, how it made me feel, how it impacted my family, and how it impacted the things that I wanted to do in my life. And the book became a healing process for me. It became therapy times 1,000. Writing out my story and actually speaking it out loud and having people say, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it actually sounds really bad, doesn't it?" They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was normal to me then." And realizing throughout it all that it isn't normal. And we need to speak up and we need to share our story. And the theme is actually very common. And I have actually had more men reach out to me than women and say, it happened to me too. The bullying, the discrimination happened to me too. And I left a career that I loved because of a toxic culture. And that's not okay. People are starting to speak up a bit more, but we need to speak up and be really, really loud about it because it's not okay. It's a toxic culture that needs to be stopped because it is the most incredible career in the world. I loved it. I loved every part of it. And the fact that I had to leave for a bigger purpose, I truly believe that now, made it worthwhile for me. But for those that didn't, it's unacceptable. And so for anybody who has watched it happen, because that was another piece that impacted me greatly, was those that watched it happen and never said anything. They were afraid. And don't be. We have to speak up. We have to speak out. We have to support one another. And we have to share what is going on so that it will stop. And we need to be loud. So I'm all about speaking up, owning your power, and standing in your truth. And so I encourage every single one of you that is listening to stand in your power. Always have the strength to stand in your power and have the courage to speak your truth, no matter what it is. So I've only shared tiny bits and pieces. I would love for you to read it in the book because it's pretty juicy and it tells everything. It's not all dark either. I did have some highlights as a little hint in the book. I was off duty and actually saved 4 people from a house fire. And so there was highlights and things that, I love to share in the book, and I'd love for you to read them. It's not all dark. I did have some moments of shining, but there's also lessons in there because I believe that there's a lesson in everything. And so if it can impact anyone and be your survival guide, then again, my mission is accomplished. So that's my story, part of it anyway. So thank you for listening. And now I'd love to chat. I'd love to answer questions and love to engage and interact.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know it's only a snippet and you gave me enough to make me want to read your book a lot more. So thank you so much for that.
I should show you. So this is the book. It's called You're on Your Own.
Mm-hmm.
It's a memoir. It's available on Amazon.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with questions, and I know Kobe has some. And then again, our audience, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we will go ahead and continue this conversation. So my question to you is, what was the awakening? You said you had that awakening that sparked that emotional release for you, that you started to feel better in that space. Was it an actual incident? Was it just the pressure, or was it the actual promotion?
It was getting screwed over on the promotional position. I realized that I could only progress as far as the boss believed in me, and it wasn't far. And I was like, everybody has a limit. And that was just the final. I'm like, this is not okay. And I am not okay with it. And I do believe that things happen for a reason. And I was redirected on purpose to get me out of that toxic culture. But that was the awakening. They actually went to great lengths and they changed the posting. They had posted the job. I applied along with a couple other people. And then they decided that it didn't go to enough places, so they wanted to repost it. Well, when they reposted it, because I can be like a little private investigator sometimes when I get a gut feeling about something, and I checked the posting and they had actually changed the requirements to meet the external candidate who didn't meet the full requirements. So they had changed it in order to be able to bring him in. And I was like, you know what? That's enough for me.
Wow. The more you talk, the more I'm like, this can't possibly be. Sounds more like a rescue 9/11 or a rescue fire show. So we have a question that says, did any of them apologize to you after leaving?
No. there's actually been quite a few that completely disowned me for speaking up because they believe that what happened there should stay there. So I'm okay with it, because that to me is the definition of abuse and manipulation. And I am proud to tell my story. And if they don't like it, then maybe they shouldn't have done the things that they did, if they're worried about it being told. And I've never mentioned names. I'm way classier than that. And again, like I said, it's not about who, but I don't expect to ever receive an apology. And I don't actually know that I would believe it or consider it to be genuine. I will leave that with them, and I wish them nothing but the days that they deserve.
Kobe, your question?
So mine is, did any of this at some point like affect your relationship at home? Like bring in what you experienced on that shift and then bringing it home with you.
It had a huge impact on my home life. Because I couldn't control anything at my job, I was a control freak at home. And I lived in a state of fear 24/7, like I was functioning in a trauma response. And so I tried to micromanage and control everyone and everything around me. My son, our nanny, my husband. It was bad. It impacted my life huge. My husband and I were not well in our marriage. It was, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was just bad. It was just really bad.
So the follow-up question to that is, did that lead to, I know you mentioned you went through your process of getting therapy and then feeling like you needed more in that space. Did that then transition into like family or at least spousal counseling, or it's some kind of space where you and your husband can get back to where you are now?
Yeah, we did couples therapy, and then each of us was also doing our own one-on-one therapy. My husband, of course, like most, brought his own trauma and stuff to the marriage as well, from childhood and experiences that he had had. And by me functioning in the state that I was, it elevated him as well. And it started to be where he spoke to me the same way that they did. And there was aggression and, mental and emotional stuff happening there as well. And we both had a massive awakening and realizing that we had massive work to do. And so each in our own lane, doing our own work. And I am so proud of him, because he's not even remotely close to the same man that he was in the work that he's done for himself and processing through his stuff as well. And we each just did our own work, and our marriage, thank goodness, survived and thrived. And then we had work to do with our child as well, because he had been impacted throughout his younger years from the stuff that I had brought to the table, and my husband's reactions and my reactions. And it was just an aggressive space to be in. And I have huge regrets with that, with my child and being young and seeing that side of me. And I wasn't able to be the nurturing, compassionate mom that I wanted to be, because I was so busy trying to control everything. And I was literally terrified 24/7. And I was running on burnout. And yeah, it was a lot for both of us, but we have come out the other side stronger.
Right. Okay, we have more questions here. Were you ever afraid that after speaking out, it would negatively affect your life outside of work?
No, honestly, I got to the point, because I had lived my entire life worried about what other people thought. And I had tried everything to prove myself, and nothing was ever good enough. And through the healing stuff that I had done, I finally realized that I had a voice as well, and I had a story to tell, and it was okay to share my experiences. And those that didn't like it, that was on them. I made very sure that I didn't do anything. I didn't name anybody. I didn't put myself in a position to, for legal action or anything like that. Like I said, the story is, it's mine. It's about me. And it's not about who or them. It's about how what they did impacted me. And so I was very careful in keeping it to that perspective and not pointing fingers at anybody. We all played a role, and it's me owning my role right from childhood to today, basically. And I'm okay with those that are angry at me. I don't need that validation. I spent my entire life seeking external validation, and I don't need that anymore. I was reached out to by HR from the city after I retired. I spoke part of my story first on a podcast. That was the first piece that came out. And they panicked, I think. They were worried that I was maybe going to be suing them or something was going to come of it. And so they reached out to me right away, very concerned. And we had a conversation that was incredible. And I just said to them, there is nothing that can be done. I'm not going after anybody. I'm not suing anybody. I just want the freedom to be able to tell my story. I'm not going after anyone or anything, and no one was there for me through all of it. So please don't try to be there for me now. Where were you 13 years ago when, all of this stuff was going on? So she agreed and said, absolutely, we will not interfere. Share your story, and we wish you all the best. And so it's been good.
Got another one here. It says, did you ever have anyone downplay your experiences and tell you it's not that bad?
Oh, all the time. They gaslit me all the time. And I was the problem. My reaction to their mistreatment was the problem. And there was so much of, see, this is what happens when you hire a female. And it was constant, right from the beginning, right till the end.
Sure. Okay, next question. I know you spoke on deciding not to take legal action when they reached out, but once you decided to leave the department, did you ever think of pursuing legal action against the department then?
Never.
Never. Okay.
Never. No, that has never been even a thought of mine.
Gotcha. And then the next question, what advice do you have for therapists for first responders?
Sorry, you cut out
What
on me.
advice do you have for therapists for first responders, the therapists that see our first responders?
What worked for me was hypnotherapy. I sat back and watched a person on Instagram for over a year and was curious and intrigued by it. But I was such a control freak, and I was so worried about actually sharing my story that I didn't want to be in a vulnerable position to share it with somebody that could possibly tell someone or know someone, or because the only person that ever knew anything fully was my mom. She was my sounding board and she knew everything. Other people only knew bits and pieces. And finally, one day, the hypnotherapist shared something on her Instagram, and I was like, that's it. I'm doing it. I'm ready. And I jumped in both feet, and I said to her, I am going to be a project because I'm a control freak, and you're probably not going to be able to hypnotize me. And she was like, okay, challenge accepted. And it was life-changing. I have done talk therapy. I have done EMDR. I have done all modalities. And for myself, hypnotherapy was by far the most impactful for me.
Gotcha. And is hypnotherapy, is it based off your growth in therapy, or is there like set sessions? How was that process comparative to the other modalities that did not work as effective for you?
It goes into your subconscious and goes right to the root cause of what you're experiencing. And so it removes the emotional attachment. The memories will always be there, but it removes the emotional attachment to it. So she will take you back through the experiences as far as your subconscious will allow it to go. And then once you've been in the same spot for a couple times, then she knows that that's the root cause. And it's interactive. So, I mean, at any time, it's not like you see on, on stage where people are acting all silly and doing those things. That's for theatrical purposes. I mean, you can open your eyes at any time and get up and leave the room if you wanted. It's in the comfort of your own home. She does it by Zoom. So she's on an iPad beside my bed, and I had headphones in, and I'm interacting and talking with her, and she's asking me what I see and what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing as we were going through. And then she brought me back through those experiences in reverse, and there was no emotional attachment there once I released at the root cause. So those memories are still there, and now I'm like, I don't even care. Whereas before it would have a huge reaction of some sort, usually in my body. I could tell you where it was in my body first, usually impacted my chest. I'd feel like I couldn't breathe. I would panic breathe all the time. And that works really well when you're on SCBA. And now I feel like I could run a marathon. I feel light and free.
Got one over here in the chat box. Says, were you ever told something like this is what women deserve or get in this field? And if so, how did you handle that? What were you able to say?
I was never told that women deserved it. There was, when I got hired at the time, there was 2 women in the province that I lived in then that had been bullied and mistreated and were in legal proceedings. And one of them ended up committing suicide over the ordeal. And they said, see, that's what happens when you hire a female. It goes too far, and then all of this stuff, and it's attention seeking. But that was the only reference that had ever been made. It wasn't ever stated that that's what we deserved. It was just, this is what happens when you hire a female. And I ended up getting pregnant while I was working. And that caused a whole other situation because that had never been, an issue before. And again, see, that's what happens when you hire a female. And they actually tried to get me fired because they claimed that I was disabled because I was pregnant. So that was the only reference.
Did not know pregnancy was a disability. That's interesting.
Yeah, the chief was like, no, we are not, she cannot be fired for that. You guys are walking on thin ice and you need to stop. And again, this is my union that was doing this. Like, this never ever came from management. I had issues with management at the end because it was personal, but the initial chief that hired me was amazing. But all of the issues that I had stemmed from the union and my coworkers.
Gotcha. And then we have another question here. It says, and I think this is in response to you talking about the therapy. You are actually cognizant of what was going on at all times during it. So you were like aware that you were in the room, aware that you can get up and go.
Absolutely. And she said she had people that like get up and go to the washroom in the middle of a session. So at any time you can just open your eyes. But you're in it and you want to get the answers, and you're paying for it as well. So it's, you want to make the most of it. And yeah, you are fully aware.
Gotcha. So unless there's more questions, I'll give one final question. You mentioned fear through your presentation often, both maybe fear of people finding out what actually happened. You had fear while you were in the job. Maybe others have fear of working with the female. How do you think fear restricts first responders? How do you think it puts you in a place of not being the best version of yourself?
Well, fear is based out of lack of control. So I had no control over what they were doing, what they were saying, the agreements that they had made on the sidelines. So that was all fear based. It can stem from so many things. I brought fear in from having a baby as well. And then the fears that I had from the job projected onto having, a child to look after and try to keep alive. So, I mean, it can impact in so many different ways. But getting to the root cause of each individual's fears and not allowing it to take over, because it can be you can use it as a driving force as opposed to using it to hold you back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Has there
Like now,
been any more females that joined the department after you left?
no, there was
No.
none the entire time I was there, and they just had a hiring process. And I actually asked one of the guys, and I'm like, "Was there any females?" And there wasn't. Honestly, with the current bosses, I wouldn't wish a female to be in there because I don't think it would be any different.
So one last question. You're currently still living in the community that you worked in, right? Has
No, I moved last summer.
You moved last summer? Okay.
Yep.
So when you first left and started writing this book, was there community support? Was there was moving the reason because the community became distant, or there was some kind of blowback in that space? Just trying to
No,
make a connection of how the community can help in these spaces.
the community was amazing. Like the response that I have got has been overwhelming, positive. I went back and did a book signing. We moved because my husband's job moved us, but we were also in a position where we were trying to get out of, because it's a very small town, which also doesn't help when you bring forth something whistleblowing like this as well. But I have had nothing but positive response other than the few that have disowned me and have gone silent. But there has been no negativity, no backlash. Nothing has been said. We didn't move because of it. I go back all the time because my family is still there. I'm only an hour and a half away, in a different province now, but I still go back all the time because my friends are there, my family is there, and people are constantly asking me, can you bring a book? Can you sign a book? Can you come and, see us and do another book signing? So I'm going to do a couple events that are coming up in the coming months with my books, and I am not worried, and I am very proud, and I hope everybody in the community buys a book. There have been so much talk about how lucky I was and how, of course, there was always talk too that I got the job because it had to fill a requirement of, they had to hire a female, which wasn't the case. They did everything they could to not hire a female. But I wanted people to understand me because I had never been vulnerable, for one. That scared the shit out of me. For people to know the truth about my life and who I really was. I didn't even know who I was. And writing the book has given me an opportunity for people to actually understand who I am and the things that I experienced even from childhood that impacted my life, that continued into relationships, that continued into the fire service. And being vulnerable is one of the most crucial pieces in being strong. And I believed that vulnerability meant I was weak, and it's the absolute opposite. I did everything I possibly could to not be vulnerable. And once I decided to be and to speak up and say, this is who I am, and I'm not going to have a facade. And people always thought that I was a bitch, that I was, stone cold. And that is not the case. Pieces of me was dying inside because I'm actually very compassionate and I'm very empathetic and I love people and I love connection. And it got to the point where I didn't have any friends and I didn't even know how to have fun anymore. I had lost sight of every piece of who I was. And so giving people the opportunity in the book to actually realize what I experienced and why I was the way that I was and who I am now is a completely different person. And I wanted to share that with people so that they could know me once I discovered who me was. I wasn't just the girl firefighter. I wasn't just the woman in uniform, because I put that uniform on and I was a completely different person. That was my identity, right? I didn't know anything outside of firefighting. Every siren, every time the pager would go off, every, time there was something, I was like constantly looking out the window. Is there, do I need to go? My family could be on hold because my job was the be all end all of my life. And then I came to the realization that it's actually just a job. And we're replaceable, like super fast.
We got some more questions rolling in. Do you have book signing in the States or a way to order a book and get it signed? And I think we'll plug that in there, but it's through Amazon.
You can order the book through Amazon. If you want a signed one, I can send it in the post. Like I can put it in the mail and send it off that way as well. So it is possible to do that.
Okay. What advice would you give a woman who wants to work in any field that is seen as a male career or career field, or just male dominated?
Don't listen to the noise. Stand in your power and have the courage to speak your truth right from the get-go.
Love that. Love that. Is there the same issue? Is there the same issue you had in other departments in your surrounding area? So maybe not fire, but like other first responder departments?
There was. Right when I got on as an auxiliary, we had the first female police officer had started. And it was actually the two captains that I had serious troubles with. They were on a scene with her and they refused to work with her. And they got in supreme trouble. So it flowed over from other departments as well. We only had one fire department in my town. It was very small, 12,000 people. So it only had one. But you could see it in the beginning with the police service. Ambulance had always had females, so I had never seen an issue there. But fire and police.
Someone just bought the book, they said.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. It says just about the book, wishing you the best. I absolutely love that. So go ahead, Lynnette, plug again where we can get the book. If there's any social medias, yes, show that
This
picture
is the
again.
book.
Yes,
You're on your own.
you're on your own. It has that beautiful picture of you there in uniform. I
Yes,
love
so you
that.
can get it on Amazon
Mhm.
and find me on social media. Fire Within Crisis Services Inc. on Instagram and Facebook. I just started on LinkedIn, but I'm not familiar with that. So usually on Instagram is where I'm most active in my stories, and I put a lot of educational posts and things like that on there. So interact, follow me. My website, firewithincrisisservices.com. You can find me there with all of the things that I do. I do one-on-one trauma coaching. I can do them virtually as well. And I do ICISF courses. I instruct assisting individuals in crisis and group crisis intervention. Peer support is something I am extremely passionate about. I was the team leader in the department for 9 years and seeing the impacts that it has and how powerful of results it brings. So I am a huge advocate for peer support. If I don't have my own resources, I will find you someone that does. So if you're ever in the need of someone to speak to and it's above my expertise, I will help you find someone that can help you. You guys have an incredible resource and multiple resources within this as well with Frontline Strong. So there's, collaboration. There's multiple streams that we can go down.
Awesome. Lynnette, thank you so much for being here today and telling only a fraction of your story. I'm so excited to purchase the book and read more. And then I think I'm going to send my copy to you and see if I can get it, have you sign it as well, because I would love to have a signed copy from you. We would love to have you come back on if you'd like to talk about any other specific topics as well, or tell more into your story. We thank you so much for being here. Kobe, thank you for introducing us to any last thoughts, comments, Kobe, Lynnette?
I just want to say thank you for having me. It is an absolute honor to be able to share my story with you. And thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting by buying a book. And a huge kudos to all of you that are showing up and learning how to support one another, taking mental health seriously. It's important. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's been great. And thank you for continuing to help out where I've needed and supported our mission. It's been just great knowing you for the last 4 years.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, guys, as always, thank you for joining us. And please go to our website, fst5.org, or give us a call on our 24/7, 365 crisis and resource line, 833-34-STRONG, 833-347-8766. If you are interested in getting in touch with Lynnette, once we post this live webinar on our website tomorrow, you'll be able to see her social media tags and website there as well. And we will also post this information on our social medias through FST5 on Instagram, Facebook, and actually TikTok. We have a FST5 TikTok as well. So we're super excited about that. Please don't hesitate to tell friends about our monthly webinar. Please have your spouses, friends, family join us. The education sessions that we have here are so important, and they lift people up in such a dynamic way. And we just want to make sure that everyone is getting the support that they need. So again, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you guys next month.